Eric Ezekonwu is kind of a throwback type player. The guy who he reminds me of is I was kind of trying to put this together, paying attention to what I saw on tape, paying attention to what I saw from the testing and the measurables. He reminds me a little bit of a Travis Fulgham. And I think if you take this entire classification of wide receivers, it's going to include some names that are a little controversial here in Philadelphia, right? Ultimately, when you're trying to categorize this type of player, I think what you're talking about is a wide receiver that can play as a Z. He can play outside to the field side, of course, but probably is a more natural player to play, towards the boundary in condensed areas to where their size and physicality can be best used. However, what makes them stand out, because that's a lot of different players. You don't have to be big and physical to play, in limited space. You can honestly beat people with speed releases and things like that as well. But it's the contact balance, guys. It's what you can do playing through contact, and I think it kind of categorizes a couple of separate groups of players when we talk about kind of playing through contact, right? I think you have the one side of the theory where you get one side of the faction where you get players such as Alshon Jeffrey, right? Juwan Jennings is a modern player that I think is kind of a little Alshon Jeffrey-like, if you will, right? I think Brandon Marshall's kind of in there. But what I'm talking about when I talk, and I don't think Brandon Marshall is a perfect fit for this, but the Juwan Jennings and the, Alshon Jeffries, these are physical players. These are dudes that can get really physical with you. However, they're a little bit lanky, right? There's something about their frame that's kind of tall, if you will, right? That they're put together and built differently than the other side of the faction, right? The other side of the faction being your JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I know, guys. I know when we talk about J-Jaw, that's fighting words here as Philadelphia Eagle fans, but he's definitely a part of this categorization, right? That's your A.J. Browns. I know that's fighting words, right? I get it. Travis Fulgham. I think Travis Fulgham is definitely one of those guys, too, that accounts for this. And I think when I was looking at the tape and I was watching Eric Ezekonwu play, I immediately thought to myself, holy hell, this guy's very similar to Travis Fulgham. This is exactly the vibes I get by watching his tape. The way this young man plays through contact, he's got some Travis Fulgham to his game. All right, y'all, I want to talk about this player because this is a guy who is a long shot to make the Philadelphia Eagles roster. He's going to have to earn it, and I love the bottom of the roster, guys. I love this fight that's going to take place for the 5th or 6th receiver, depending on how many receivers they keep. I think that battle is damn good, guys. I mean, just hear me out. Darius Cooper, okay? Elijah Moore. Then you have Johnny Wilson, big, tall, physical guy, more of the Mike Evans, just not the type of speed Mike Evans has, right? Probably more of the, if you looked at it from a historical perspective, you're talking about a different classification of receiver than what we've seen recently, okay? Then you get past that, guys, and you got, players like Eric Ezekonwu, who I think is going to be another one of these dudes that could put up a fight for the roster. And then you have we have guys that we talked about yesterday, where we're talking about former Green Bay Packers and guys that are familiar with the system who are going to have a shot to potentially make this freaking football team. I think the bottom of this roster is a damn good camp battle. And you also got to include a guy in there that's a punt returner in Britton Covey, who I don't think has a lot of receiving value. I think there was a time and a place for that, but he just proved not durable enough to do the job, although I do feel like he was an underrated athlete, and I do think he's actually a decent receiver. I just don't think he's physical enough to last in the NFL, to be honest. So with that said, guys, let's go to the tape. I want to show you a few things I saw from this player, and let's talk about camp as we're basically closing in on camp. We're a few days out from camp being a thing, guys. All right, y'all, let's get it. So Eric Ezekonwu, when I was watching his tape, what kind of caught me off guard at first was when you see a dude that's 6'1", 6'2", he's just short of 6'2", guys. He's right around 215 pounds. He plays with tremendous contact balance. What stood out to me about the tape, though, it was the fact that there was more explosion to his game than I was anticipating. And I'm talking about in two separate ways, right? I'm talking about the way that you guys probably envisioned the minute I said the word explosion. You're probably thinking to yourself oh, he's got a little speed to him, right? He's not the fastest player I've ever watched tape on, guys. He's not even close to that. But what he is a pretty fluid mover for a dude that's of his stature, the way his build is. You wouldn't expect him to be able to create the separation that I'm seeing him create at times on the tape. I'm oh, okay, I see why other teams have had interest in this young man as time has gone on. And like he had a really, he's playing in, I can't remember if it was the UFL or whatever it was, guys, that he just came in from, but like he had crazy numbers coming out from like the UFL or whatever it was he was playing in, guys. I mean, you could see that other teams have also identified the talent, which probably means there's other fan bases who've probably made similar videos to what I'm making right now, basically pumping this guy up. But it hasn't launched. There's been a failure to launch with the player. With all the physical gifts that you could see from this guy on tape, along with the fact that, the thing that you would knock him for, he tends to be better at than what you normally see guys at his size playing. So right off the bat, guys, I get the suspicion of what's going on, Steve? Like, why does a player that is this talented, that is catching the eye of people like yourself, why the hell isn't this guy sticking to a team? I don't know the answer to that, guys. I mean, we're going to have to find out this camp. I think as Eagle fans, we'll get a spin at it. But I think what I'm looking at is that you don't have to necessarily make the initial 53-man roster to impact things as the season goes on. So I'm kind of looking at it like I don't care if the guy makes the initial 53. I'm looking at it, is this a person they may keep around the roster? And as time goes on, as development happens, as he learns more and more of the system, is this a dude we're feeling differently about? This is an interesting one, man, because I really love the way that the Eagles are kind of approached this idea of how do you replace A.J. Brown, right? Because there's not a perfect solution to that. You can't just go sign a Dontavian Wicks and say oh, that guy's the next A.J. Brown. There's some talent to Dontavian Wicks. I don't think his talent has been fully tapped. I'm not about to come out here and claim this guy to be the next A.J. Brown, man. It's just, as much as I'm pissed off with what happened with A.J. Brown and the way he left the city, I can't maintain football intelligence and say some shit like that. But I do think Dontavian Wicks was a very smart hire. He was a very smart signing or trading, a trade candidate for the Eagles. I think they went out and did a really good job of filling the role, not necessarily the total production. I think people got to understand there is a difference between those things. Then what do they do? Well, they got a young guy that they brought in last season, was a UDFA. We remember the coverage. The dude had never actually been a part of a huddled offense before, right? In Darius Cooper, who's a sub 6 foot guy. He's 5'11", just short of 6 feet. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Keyshawn Butts. We talked about that earlier in the year when the trade rumors were floating around. I said, damn, I like the player, but I just thought, he's basically Darius Cooper, right? You got a guy like that also can play as kind of, to the field side as an outside receiver, is what we would call a Z, right? But he also can play on the boundary, and he has the physicality to do that type of thing. And he can play in a slot as a power slot, just like, our targeted today's video. Eric Ezekanmu, that guy can also do the exact same thing. I love the way they've approached this when you kind of look at it from its totality, right? You've got the production part of this has got to be made up mostly by Devontae Smith et al. And everyone else, guys, right? And then you got to look at it from the standpoint of from a role standpoint, what can you do from the roles? And I think that's where you get into the Dontavian Wicks, guys. I think that's where you get into the situations and you get into the Eric Ezekanmu, if you can keep this guy around and this is someone that's worth developing, right? That's where you have the Darius Cooper. That's where you have the Johnny Wilsons of the world. Yes, you can replace the role. You can't necessarily replace the production. The production has to be done by everybody together. You have to basically take all those targets that he received. You got to allocate those over several players. And then you got to hope that the offense holds up to the type of that type of production that you can get, which, to be fair, guys, it's barely over 1,000 yards. It's the production from last year. I'm not worried about replacing the production we saw from 24 and 25. I think you can do that collectively pretty easily. I do worry about replacing the collection of targets and then, yardage, receiving yards, and then some of the underlying analytics, such as beating man press coverage and, just beating man coverage in general. What we saw A.J. Brown do in 2022 and 2023. If you're looking for that kind of production, I think that's where the question marks come into play. But, we won't know, guys. We won't know until they get on the field. It's going to be by the whole group, essentially. All right. As I'm going in here and I'm watching this, what I saw the other side of this that made me, not just distancing and creating distance and separation in his route running, he plays through contact. Sure. That's why we started this whole video. That's the first thing that drew me in. But it's the fact that if you're looking at it from a West Coast offense, right? If you're looking from it from almost spread concepts to an extent too, you're looking at a guy that can actually get you some yak, right? You can get that, what they call rack, actually, run after the catch. I think this young man has the ability to kind of be pretty damn dangerous doing that. I think this dude can be pretty damn productive for the Philadelphia Eagles in this type of role. Like now, he's got to crack the field. And like, I got to be honest with you, it's a tall order, man. I mean, it depends. If Johnny Wilson isn't right, then Johnny Wilson isn't right. It's a non-factor, right? But if Johnny Wilson has recovered from the injury, we had heard some pretty damn impressive things coming out of the Eagles camp last season about Johnny Wilson. So, you're kind of hoping that didn't not just derail him in terms of like physicality, physically derail him, but you're also hoping it didn't derail him from momentum and like, the mentality of things. That's something we won't know until he's actually on the field, right? But then you got Darius Cooper. Like I said, guys, the task to get on the field is going to be quite extensive for him. Elijah Moore, a guy that definitely can create separation, can definitely play out of the slot, can also play outside as a receiver as well. Like, this is a guy that also creates a hell of a lot of like separation, running routes and stuff. I'm curious, guys, because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't know how this thing is going to shape and it's going to shake itself out. But I am kind of excited to see some of the damn football games this year in preseason. I'm excited to see some of these preseason games because I do think there's some pretty interesting collection of talents that's going to be playing on the second and third teams, right? You have a pretty damn interesting quarterback battle happening between Andy Dalton and of course, Tanner McKee, assuming both of those guys roll into the preseason and we don't trade one away before that, right? Then you got Cole Payton, the young guy that we want to see, hey, man, like how much of a development is this guy, right? Then you look at the offensive line, guys. We know we got a pretty decent second, line. I mean, if you look at it from like, okay, well, Fred Johnson's in there. Past Fred Johnson, guys, they got, Michael Jordan at the left guard. From there, they might put Majors in at center, then kind of play, Drew Kendall as a right guard. Even though Drew Kendall's going to play all across the interior, they probably need to work him in at guard a little bit to be certain that they're comfortable there, right? Then you got the young rookie and Markel Bell at right tackle. Like, even the offensive line. The offensive line is going to have some intrigue, some interest. So, I mean, I look at that, the third team, you got Michael Morris, you got Cam Williams from last year, and you got Miles Hinton. Like, there's a lot of dudes out here, right, that have some real freaking intrigue, some real freaking interest, right, that we're going to be excited to see play and get reps here between that second and third team. Then you take it out to the running back situation, guys. You got Dameon Pierce out there. You got Elijah Mitchell, former 49er. Who's going to be taking some snaps out there, right? They went and got Carson Steele and like how they're going to play these tight ends, right? Daquan Wright. We got a lot of interesting dudes out there. Stone Smart's an interesting guy to watch, Cameron Latu, is there really a role for him on the second and third team, seeing how the Eagles kind of shape things together to grade and judge these dudes? I think that's important to see what they do from the base sets. They're not going to give away a lot there, but it will tell you a little bit about what the basis of the offense is, right? And kind of how they're viewing these dudes a little bit. I think that's exciting. And then you finally get out here to this receiving core, which I think on, the backside of things here, I don't know how much they're going to play a Hollywood Brown. I think they know what Hollywood Brown is, right? Mekhi Lemon might get a little run, though. Mekhi Lemon might get some work in these games to kind of get ready for, what's going on here. Dontavian Wicks, he might see a handful of snaps here and there, but, I don't think Hollywood Brown, I don't think Dontavian Wicks, and I highly doubt that Devontae Smith is going to see a ton of time in preseason. They might get a few series, guys, basically. But that leaves the back end of the roster, which I think is actually quite damn talented. Torrey, the young man we covered yesterday, former Green Bay Packers receiver, right? Then you got the young man we're covering today, which is Eric Ezekamu, who I think is going to be interesting to watch play, man. I'm expecting there to be a little bit of a Travis Fulgham arc to his story. And I know Travis Fulgham ultimately didn't work out in the league, but I don't think it was talent. I don't think Travis Fulgham failed off of the talent, guys, because we saw what that dude could do over a really short span of games. Like, I was kind of shocked that this dude was kind of just floating around there and it was so easy for the Eagles to go get him that year. Because, man, there was a period of time in that season where Travis Fulgham was by far the best damn player on the Philadelphia Eagles roster until they went out the following season and got Devontae Smith in the draft. And then, they added some pieces in 21. But there was a period of time where Fulgham was absolutely the most consistent player we had outside of Dallas Goedert and freaking Zach Ertz. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting with Johnny Wilson. I think it's going to be really interesting with Darius Cooper to see the advancement of these guys, see how these guys are going to kind of line it up and play. And I do think there's talent, man. I think there's a chance for this freaking team, even the second and third team, to put up some points. I kind of want to see what the new execution of the offense, paying attention to what they're trying to do, but also the individual player performances, because I do think there are some damn good roster battles at tight end, damn good roster battles along the offensive line, and I think this one is being slept on, and I've covered it the last few days, guys. I think that 5th and potentially 6th wide receiver, we don't know they're going to go that deep at receiver. It might only be 5, but there's a potential they could go 6. That's a damn good battle, man. That is a very slept-on battle. I'm trying to give you guys some insight of like the way I'm looking at this roster, like offensively, tight end, and then kind of this idea of like, are you keeping 6 wide receivers? Because that tells you they're going to play a shit ton of 11-man. You're probably going to have even some spread concepts, maybe some 10-man and maybe 2 personnel or something like, you're going to use a shit ton of receivers basically. Or are they going to keep 4 tight ends? That would tell you they're going to play a lot more 12-man than we probably previously suggested. Like that means 12-man and 13-man personnel is going to be a part of what they do, right? Or inside of this weird way of shaping the running backs and the tight ends, do you start to see these quasi like lead blockers at it, right? The Cameron Latus, the Carson Steeles, right? The Stone Smarts, those type of players. If those guys are the ones that get elected to be like one of the last, tight ends, or they make a classification like Ben Van Sumeren where they actually add a fullback, that would be interesting because that tells you that, okay, they're probably going to play a little bit more 2-man running back sets than what we've played in the past. Like they're going to play around this a little bit. It's interesting, guys, to see how this is all going to shake its way out. Like we don't know until they shape the roster, but I am interested to see how they lean and how they try to play like the different roles with different players, because I think there are some really interesting competitions taking place on this Eagles roster. And like, to be fair, some of this shit won't matter if everyone stays healthy because these guys aren't going to see the field too much. But some of those roles do matter. That tight end, quasi-fullback shit matters, guys. That definitely matters in a Shanahan system. That's a guy that may not have a shit ton of production, but that doesn't mean he's not a big part of your offense. That dude might have a legitimate damn role, right? Then you get into the guys like we're talking about today, the Eric Ezekamus, and like kind of how we're going to shape this young man. And if he were to, stick around on the practice squad, eventually starts getting some call-ups to the active roster, eventually gets placed on the active roster. If he has that kind of trajectory, that kind of arc, right? It is interesting, man. Like there's some things here, man. Like I don't know how to grade the young man in terms of his ability to run block. He's got the physicality to do it. He's definitely a physical enough player to be good in that, but it's all effort. Run game is all effort. So we'd have to see how much he cares, how much he wants to be on the field, and how much he would give to the run game, because I got to be honest with you. Darius Cooper is rated high as hell in the run game. And while Johnny Wilson doesn't have a high running, especially when you look at zone, Darius Cooper was a really highly graded zone blocker. When you look at Johnny Wilson, they didn't grade him out as high as I thought. He was kind of graded really low, especially in terms of zone blocking, outside, inside zone, that kind of stuff. With that said, though, Johnny Wilson's a physical guy, and I remember him actually dominating people on the edges out there. So that's one of those things where I'm just going to disagree with what I saw from the ratings, but nonetheless, you're going to have to, if you want to stick to this team and you're going to play on the back end of this roster, you're going to have special teams value, and you're going to need to be able to run block. That's going to be the big mystery when we talk about wide receivers, guys. All right, let me know your opinions. What do you think about the back end of the roster? I'm talking about that 5th, potentially 6th wide receiver spot. I'm leaning towards, I think Darius Cooper is going to get the nod as the 5th wide receiver. And then it's a battle of, do they keep 6? Because now you're talking about, do they keep a Johnny Wilson? Do they keep an Elijah Moore? Do they keep Torrey? Do they keep, Eric Ezekamu? Like, now I think it gets interesting if they do actually go 6 receivers, right? Outside of that, then it becomes interesting how they want to shape the practice squad. Do they want to keep a punt returner that they can kind of pull off the, a guy that's got that kind of special teams ace type stuff? They can pull off the practice squad if they need it. It's going to get interesting like that, man. All right, y'all. If you guys want more videos like this where we break down player evaluations and stuff like that, I'll throw you up a video right here that is doing crazy numbers on YouTube. This goes over my guy Gush, and boy, did Gush get some attention when I made that video. And then over here, guys, I'll give you another player evaluation. We could talk a little bit about some Johnny Wilson if y'all want to. I talked about how Johnny Wilson's star seems to kind of be rising again. Like, this guy, if he's fully healthy, he's going to be an interesting dude to watch in camp to see if he can't kind of beat the odds a little bit. All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all's time and attention, guys, and I'll see y'all on the next video.